Good afternoon. This is Media Center Ukraine, Odesa. We continue our work for today. And now we are going to discuss the state of the Ukrainian energy system after the explosion at the Kakhovka HPP dam. Our guest is Andrian Prokip, energy expert of the Ukrainian Institute for the Future. Sorry if the stress is on the wrong letter. You can correct me. It's fine. Good afternoon, everyone. Could you briefly describe the state of the Ukrainian energy system after the explosion? Generally, after the shelling in autumn and in winter, the energy system of Ukraine is in a rather difficult condition. And the explosion at the Kakhovka HPP dam did not direct a significant direct impact because the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant was occupied almost since the first days of the full-scale invasion, and it could not work to the maximum of its capacity. In October 2022, occupiers they just disconnected from the energy system of Ukraine, and the dam, this power plant, worked in the system of the occupied territories that were synchronized with the Russian one. That's why the destruction of the dam does not have the direct impact on the energy system of Ukraine. The Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant had the smallest capacity comparing to other Ukrainian hydroelectric power plant. But of course, it has an indirect impact on the energy system of Ukraine because to decrease the flow of water, Ukraine had to change the regime of work of the power plants of Dnipro Cascade. But it was not that significant decrease that it was expected during first 2 days. And there was an impact through the flooded territories because some of the transformers and 2 solar power stations were flooded, as well as the Kherson thermal power plant. But the impact after the explosion is very small comparing to other humanitarian, psychological, and other economic impact that we're facing after the explosion. Sure thing, the change in operations of the hydroelectric power plant overlapped with the period of significant repair work during the summertime, including the nuclear energy blocks. But now the big part of our facilities are occupied, and they're also destroyed or damaged. And of course, the energy system felt the lack of the supply, which was significantly compensated by the import from other countries, and we also received the emergency support of the energy systems of neighboring countries. And of course, this is an ongoing situation, and the next winter would be quite difficult because our energy system does not have reserves, and we can see the amount of the emergency situations and short blackouts showing the real difficult condition of this system. We used to have an emergency lines and reserves, but now we're limited in our resources. And this shows that our next winter will be quite difficult as well. We remember well the end of autumn and the winter, which was very difficult because of the shelling and the damage to the energy system. You mentioned that the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant was included in the part of the system of occupiers. Am I right understanding that it also supplied power to the canal that supplied water to Crimea? I'm not sure that it was like that, because all the objects, all facilities are the part of the energy system as a whole, so we cannot speak about some specific facility. But of course, it could not but affect the equipment, which was also related to water supply through the canal. As for the state of the Ukrainian energy system and the severe winter that we all should expect, I remember that there was an idea to move the Ukrainian energy infrastructure, at least the most important part, to the underground to protect it from shelling. Is it a realistic plan? How do you think? Yes, there were such ideas, and the ideas were discussed, but we should understand that moving a significant amount of such facilities underground requires a lot of investment, and it also needs time. And now we live in the situation when a big lump of information is secret. Of course, we cannot publicly announce how we are going to prepare our energy system to the next winter, and how to protect it from shelling, which is ongoing. It never stops, and we all the time see how the energy system is damaged by the shelling. But we also need to understand that such projects like moving facilities underground are very, very expensive. We can find some cheaper and simpler solutions. But I can say, just and repeat myself, all information related to protection of critical infrastructure is sensitive, because this is security and safety, and it could not be disclosed. Yes, I can understand this. Let's discuss one more topic. It's one more idea that has been discussed, and this is the possibility of using gas storage facilities, and we have quite a lot of them in different regions of Ukraine, to store gas which belongs to the EU member states. Is it possible, and do you know anything about the project, like landing these gas storage facilities? If we look at the historical background, these storage facilities were part and parcel of the gas supply system from Russia to the EU, just to be able to ensure balance of the seasonal differences. In summer, this gas was stored in Ukrainian storage facilities, and in the winter, it was then exported further to the EU. In 2014, Ukraine terminated the contract signed previously with Gazprom, because Gazprom was like a sole manager of these gas facilities. And then Ukraine changed its approach to provide on itself its facilities to store gas from the European countries. And then we have reached the industrial scale. We have the biggest storage facilities in Europe, like more than 30 billion of cubic meters, and it is like 100 billion cubic meters from all over EU. And there was the decreasing level of consumed gas, we could not use all these gas storage facilities. And during 2 previous years, it was quite a successful business, and that was quite a good example. And this winter, Europe expects that the conditions could be rather severe, and there are still some small consignments of gas from Russia to the EU, but the EU member states have been preparing to the possible termination of this supply. And of course, to protect themselves, European companies try to store as much gas as possible. And after they fill their own storage facilities, it is expected that they can use Ukrainian gas storage facilities. The goal of our government is to have 14 billion cubic meters of gas before the winter period, and so there will be some space left that can be provided to the European company for the storage. And in July, we expect increasing demand for our storage facilities. European storage facilities are now filled by more than 70%, and as soon as they are out of space, they will ask Ukrainian company Transgas, which manages these storage facilities. Of course, there are some fears that this infrastructure can be assaulted from the air, but we and the Western countries see the increased efficiency of the Ukrainian air defense system. There are some storage facilities which is quite difficult to destroy, and some other energy system facilities that we saw last year, and there is following the result of cost-benefit analysis, could be as an attempt to store gas in storage facilities. I have a question from a journalist watching our broadcast online. The question is, how much money can Ukraine earn through lending of these storage facilities? It is difficult to speak about precise number because the gas storage tariff is open. It is approved by the National Committee regulating the services. There is like precise amount, and of course the tariff depends on the point of entry, the conditions, and now I cannot just state some precise number, but this could not be a kind of economic miracle for Ukraine, but of course, anyway, this will be an important contribution to the Ukrainian economy because our export suffered. And last winter was quite warm for Europe, which was good for both them and us. But if the next winter will be more severe, can Ukraine again earn something, not only through lending gas storages, but also through gas extraction and through sales of this gas, because I think that some gas pipelines from Russia are still operative in Ukraine. The transit of gas and oil is there. And but Russia pays for that transit not to the amount which is foreseen by the contract. Last year, occupiers, together with their minions from the terrorist republic, tried to interfere with the equipment of the gas transportation system. Ukrainian companies announced force majeure and refused to accept requests for transit through one of the routes. This is Kakhovka, and and they just kept transit through another point, Sucha, and they offered to increase the amounts of supply through Sucha. Gazprom said that it allegedly cannot increase supply through that route, and the transit contract envisaged that the Russian party should repump at least 40 billion of cubic meters of gas of transit, or should pay if this amount is less. Russia refused to pay for that 40 billion cubic meters, and they just started paying only for transit amounts through the route from Sucha, from the Sucha gas station. Ukraine threatened to refer to the tribunal, but I don't know if Ukraine has done this or not, but it started preparing. And in response, Gazprom said that in this case they would stop paying at all, and they will put sanctions on Naftogaz and the operator of gas transportation system, meaning that there will be no business related to gas. But that was back then when Russia still was trying to blackmail Europe using the gas supply. But the European companies, they miraculously showed the possibilities of diversification. And, for example, they also used the liquefied natural gas. And now Europe is not that sensitive to the amount of gas supplied from Russia. Moreover, the European states, they very quickly going to the point where they will be able to refuse from the Russian gas. And this is like not that favorable conditions for Gazprom, because the natural gas export infrastructure was developed solely for the European market. And the amount of gas that they do not supply to Europe, that Russia doesn't supply to Europe, they cannot sell it somewhere else. And they will have to decrease the amount of extracted natural gas, leading to decreased profit from the export of natural gas. There is also transit of oil. The northern part of Druzhba pipeline that supplies gas to Hungary, Czech Republic, and Slovakia. But we can see some interesting statements. There have been at least 5 or 6 of them. When Russia stated that Ukraine allegedly attacked the infrastructure of that pipeline on the territory of Russia using UAVs. We saw such information only in Russian media, but they were not confirmed by Ukrainian media or European Western media. Last year, there was a highly probable scenario when Russia would stop the transit of oil, saying that Ukraine attacked some infrastructure. Hungary, which is a kind of Kremlin's partner in Europe, and it does not understand Ukrainian problems and the war. And such action could only increase escalation of the Hungary-Ukraine relations. And we can already see now how Hungary blocks the European decisions on providing military assistance to Ukraine and the work of Ukraine NATO committee. So that's why such scenario is still highly probable for this year. But at the moment, apart from those incidents, that were caused by failure to provide power to compressors, which ensure pumping of oil. First time that was the result of the missile attack when the transformer station, like supplying power to that compressor station, was destroyed. And the second time, it was, if I'm not mistaken, in October after the massive missile attack when the whole of Ukraine witnessed blackout for several days. But outside of these two incidents, Ukraine still manages to fulfill its obligations in relation to transit. We are ready to stop gas and oil transit as soon as European consumers say that they don't need them anymore. Thank you very much. And I have one more question from a journalist watching us online. Last year, there was the initiative discussed to use floating power plants from Turkey, but then the situation was stabilized. Do you know anything about this idea, this concept? Several months ago, we invited to our briefing the representatives of Turkish company, I don't remember now its name, for them to tell is it feasible, was it feasible, and could it support Ukrainian energy system, but they didn't respond to our invitation. Do you know anything about the initiative? Starting from February, the weather was quite nice, and the generation by solar power plants started increasing. And you remember that since February there were no major blackouts, and we were able to quickly repair equipment, so there was no critical need. We also increase the capacity for import of power of electric energy. The operator for European countries just agrees to increase the amounts, and together with the import, we can cover our needs. And that's why there is no need for those floating power plants, because these power plants, of course, will be more expensive. It was also discussed if it would be possible to place them in Romania to supply energy to the energy system of Romania, and further on to supply it to Ukraine. I think that this option is still under consideration, depending on the situation next winter, depending on the weather conditions, the efficiency of Ukrainian air defense system, and it will be ready to prepare the whole infrastructure. So this option is still there. Thank you. And the last question. And of course, I understand that, of course, this could be also sensitive information, but could you share us some details about how energy company of Ukraine, not only state-owned, are preparing to possible challenges to shelling, to possible accident, damages, the possible damaged main lines? Could you share some details with us? And actually, the work was done last summer as well. There were some construction installed that could defend from the missile parts or debris. Ukrenergo system operator proved to be very efficient in managing the system under the threat of shelling, and also during shelling, after the shelling, to decrease possible damage to the system. Unfortunately, the energy system is so big and so complicated that it is impossible to restructure it in a short period of time. But most measures are restricted because this is sensitive information. It is, of course, monitored by our enemy. And the missile attacks on energy infrastructure are planned not only by Russia's military, but they are planned in close cooperation with their energy specialists. In 2021, when the Ukrainian energy system was mostly synchronized with those of Russia and Belarus, and our system operator was also in the same association, the operators of those countries, they tried to get access to the whereabouts of all energy system facilities, including the constructions, GPS coordinates, the power supply lines. And of course, it is now understood that back then they were working on the scenario of attacks on our energy infrastructure. The experience of last year demonstrated that the companies and the air defense systems coped with the situation and protected the energy system and preserves its activities in the condition of war. Thank you. Thank you for the briefing. Thank you for this interview. We hope to have you with us here once again, online or offline, if you are in Odessa. Thank you very much for the shared information. Thank you too. Have a nice day. We continue for today. The next briefing will be at 2 p.m. The director of the Department of Ecology of the Odessa Military Administration will share the latest details of the effect of the Kakhovka HPP dam explosion on the ecology of the region and the Black Sea. Stay tuned.